What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Baby, don't hurt me. No more. A fitting beginning, so to speak, to the topic at hand, and that is the topic of love. And when I say the word love, you might think you know what I'm talking about. And you probably would, sort of. Because I want you to first, before I go into this, think about what I mean by love. You're probably thinking about erotic love, romantic love. That's the first type of love that springs to mind. But first it would behoove us to at least familiarize ourselves with the idea that was very prominent, at least in ancient Greek philosophy. I have no idea if the common folk upheld this or believed in this, and we can't really confirm that. And that is that, at least in certain languages in ancient Greek, the concept of love is differentiated across different categories. And in English, we tend to use love in very broad brushstrokes. We say, I love my siblings, I love my parents, I love my friends, I love my country, I love the woman, the man loves the woman loves the man, whatever. All the same word. Now, of course, everyone means different things. It's implicit in these different types of love. But again, it might be useful to explore some other ideas behind this. So the first type of love we have is eros, or sexual passionate love. The love that's typically advertised, and we'll get back to that in a bit, as being the love, the de facto love. And there's a lot to be said about that. But moving on, then we have philia. You might know, philosophy, love of wisdom. And this is the type of love that's generally typified by friendship and esteeming people and valuing them for their character. And supposedly, if one were to read into it, the Greeks value this far more than the sexuality or the eroticism of eros. And then you have agape, which is this giving universal love. Sometimes people call it Christian type of love, but it was this idea of sort of giving to everybody and caring about everyone. And you might see this concept in Buddhism as well. And then there's a concept that was not really used by the Greeks, but there was a sociologist in Canada called John Allen Lee, and he came up with this idea of pragma being the pragmatic. And he talks about quote-unquote mature love, and we'll get in that in a bit, as being typified by this concept of pragma. So I said at the beginning that you probably knew what I was talking about when I said love. The first thing that jumps to mind, of course, is romantic love, sexual love, eros, erotic love, this sort of thing. And there are very good reasons for this. It's because typically erotic love is the type of love that most captivates people. It's the thing that drives people to do all sorts of crazy things. It's the thing that overwhelms both reason, intellect, and mind. And for this very reason, because it's so endemic to our nature, our physiology, our evolution, our psychology, it is, of course, advertised as the primary form of quote-unquote love. It is what ropes people into dating sites, ropes them into all sorts of things. It's behind the notion that sex sells, and sex, you could argue, is something distinct, but it's not. Not if we're talking really about eros or erotic forms of love. They're kind of one and the same. And it's for this reason that this type of love is so advertised and so used to manipulate people. Sex sells, and this type of love sells as well. If you think about the other types of categories of love, say in the ancient Greek world, philia or what have you, agape, those loves, if you want to call them that, are much more difficult to categorize, and they're certainly a lot more difficult to engender in people. Friendships, for example, form over time, based on common interests, mutual respect, character, etc., etc. It's not something that's instantaneous. It's not something that you can simply evoke by way of hormones, the same way erotic love might be. And certainly this giving love, agape, is not something that you can advertise for either. You can talk about it as a good thing, but most people aren't motivated by either particularly well, certainly not in comparison to the erotic love, eros. And even though this category of pragma is artificial and they didn't really use it, it is instructive and useful, which is to say, maybe we're not talking about love at all, and maybe we should just abandon the word altogether. I think the fact that, at least nominally in ancient Greek philosophy, they distinguish these categories in very significant ways and ascribe different values to these different categories is very telling, because we're stuck in English with an umbrella term that basically means several different things, but also serves to confuse and manipulate. So we could dispense with the idea of love, at least initially, as a word, as a concept, because in English it's typically and arguably inextricably bound to the erotic, and simply talk about what relationships really boil down to. Now, if you've ever played the game by Paradox, Crusader Kings 2 or Crusader Kings 3, you'll have noted that forming alliances by way of marriage is incredibly important. It's a grand strategy game, in case you're not familiar. Marriages, both for you as a ruler, as well as your siblings and your children and relatives, are really important tools to get ahead in the game. And these marriage proposals and unions are entirely born of pragmatism and the utility that they yield. And of course, it's a bit hyperbolic. It's a game after all. But in former times, that was the name of the game. The idea that you would enter into marriage not because it was something that animated you romantically, but because it was pragmatic. And there we also have an idea that has existed in many different cultures throughout the world of arranged marriage, in which there's an exchange of goods, for example, a dowry. All of these things are aspects of the pragmatic. And they all eschew, largely, this notion of quote-unquote romantic or erotic love, because everyone has recognized throughout history that this sort of thing, strong and powerful and electric though it might be, for these very reasons tends to fizzle out rather quickly. And that's one of the most important factors when it comes to talking about this. So the idea in a modern context of a stable marriage might sound oxymoronic to you, but in theory it needn't be. If what the marriage itself is predicated on has nothing to do with erotic love and the typical things that people envision these days by dint of advertisement and media and what have you, that the key to a quote-unquote successful relationship or marriage are the feelings. It's all about the feels. Rather than things that had been known for probably millennia, that the feels fizzle and die out rather quickly, and that what's left after that has to be some kind of pragmatic commitment or arrangement. That doesn't necessarily always make you happy. That's the other thing. People are obsessed with being happy and content with what they're doing. And there's something to be said for that. Obviously, you don't want to be miserable. You don't want to work in a coal mine and get black lung. But that's distinct from entering into a union or a marriage and assuming that the erotic aspect of it is going to maintain it for the rest of your life in perpetuity. That definitionally has to be wrong. That just can't work. And so there needs to be something else, some kind of commitment beyond that. In former times, obviously, as marriage has sometimes been a religious institution, there was the notion that you are, as a couple, devoting yourself to, in the case of the Christian deity, God, or what have you. And that often served as a bond or a weight that would keep people together. But even considering that, religiosity has declined. And if you look at the southern states of the United States, they have the highest divorce rate in the country typically. So go figure. Now, I think that really what's necessary if people want to engage in these types of relationships and the gods forbid marriage, they need to think about the pragma. They need to think about what the long-term benefit is, and really to keep to as minimal as possible the erotic aspect of it and the things that are almost certainly not going to last long-term. Now, for me to say that in the contemporary context is heresy. It's anathema. But frankly speaking, it's true. No relationship between a man and a woman, because men and women don't really like each other very much as people, beyond that erotic kick, beyond the need to reproduce, is going to keep a relationship, and certainly not a marriage, afloat long term. People get bored and they want to move on, and that's just what happens. And so something else needs to be in place. I don't think religion in the current context will be that placeholder because it has been moribund for quite some time. And even when religious belief is in place, it doesn't really work, at least in the case of non-Catholicism, because in Catholicism, obviously, divorce is technically illegal, and it needs to be approved of by the clergy, technically. So something else needs to be put in place. And I think perhaps for those individuals who want to pursue that sort of thing, some kind of commitment to a pragmatic realism that entails, look, we're here for the long haul. That's what it's about. It's about maybe raising children, or it's about achieving some goal together, rather than flighty, fanciful, and fickle feelings that will go extinct in a few years at best. And I think that's an angle more and more people should look at these things if they so choose, if they want to pursue relationships, and certainly if they want to pursue marriage. And ideally, they should ignore the many messages they're receiving from the mainstream about romantic love, because these are fundamentally faulty and deficient. Anyways, you take care. Please hit the like button if possible. Share the video if you can. Hit the bell icon to be informed of forthcoming videos. And as always, may the gods watch over you. And if I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.